In this video, we're going to be getting the easiest Zuk cape in RuneScape history with a setup that costs less than one singular bond, minimal quests, and minimal unlocks. Not only that, but we're going to be using Revolution for the entire fight, and we're going to be using an account that doesn't have the best stats. So with that said, let's get right into it. In terms of armor, my strong recommendation would be the Obsidian armor from the Brink of Extinction quest. It's only one quest further than the Elder Kiln quest that you have to do to get the Kiln cape anyway, so in my opinion, it is well worthwhile to get the stats and do that one singular quest, as the Obsidian armor makes this method work significantly better. With that said though, if you don't want to do the quest for whatever reason, this method does still work in full Elder Rune armor, but it doesn't work quite as well. In my glove slot, I'm wearing Cinderbane gloves that are paired with Weapon Poison +++. This is not needed for the method, but it's a good little boost to damage output, especially on the waves, even though Poison doesn't actually work on the Zuk part. If you're a main account, they're probably worth the purchase, but on an Iron Man, I wouldn't bother. In my cape slot, I'm just wearing a skill cape. You could wear your Kiln cape, or you could wear a defense cape if you want the Sign of Life effect, but I'm not 99 defense on this account, so that wasn't an option for me. In the necklace slot, you've got a couple options. If you've got access to Ancient Curses and Soul Split, which I do not have on this account, you could absolutely go with an Essence of Finality or an Amulet of Souls, but for me, I'm going with an Amulet of Zealots, because I'm only level 53 prayer. Because of that, we're going to be sticking to the basic protection prayers, and on top of that, we'll be using the single stat boosting prayers that are amplified by the Amulet of Zealots to get a good chunk of extra damage and accuracy. In the ring slot, we are using the Tokkul-zuk ring that is a reward for one of the earlier quests in the Kiln line. This is going to provide 10% additional damage during the Zuk waves, as well as Har Aken, so it's very worthwhile to have. In my pocket slot, we've got a Scrimshaw of Vampirism, because it's going to stack really nicely with all of the other healing and make a setup that basically makes us completely unkillable for the entirety of this run. And then as for weapons, we're actually going to bring multiple weapons here, both dual wields and a 2H, and I'll explain why in a second. For my dual wields, I've got a set of Drygors, but you could do anything from Chaotix to Twin Fury Blades to the lower level Leg Swords or the top end Leg Swords, really whatever you'd like. And then for my 2H weapon that I've got on my invent, I'm using a Dragon Rider Lance, but this method also does work with a Masudis War Spear. It would work okay with the Lanicus Spear, although not quite as well as the Lance, and of course you could use a Scythe or a Tumikin's Light if you'd like to do that, and you're not balling on a budget like I am. Because Obsidian armor isn't augmentable, I'm not using any perks, but I did want to mention that on my weapons, I'm currently using Precise 3, and then I'm also using Energizing 2. Energizing is one of the new perks that was recently updated, and it gives you a little bit of extra flat accuracy bonus, which is really helpful when you're doing something like this on a lower level setup. You might be wondering why we're using dual wield weapons as well as a 2H, and I'm going to explain that right now as we go over our Revolution bars. And I'm saying bars because we're actually going to be using a handy setting called Action Bar Binding to give us two different Revo bars for two different scenarios. We're going to stick to our two-handed weapon for the entirety of the waves, but then whenever we're facing off against Zuk and Har Aken, as well as the Pizza phase, we're going to swap to the Drygors, and that's going to automatically swap our action bar to a bar that is going to make all of those sections completely free and doable with no food. Our dual wield Revo bar is as follows: Berserk, Meteor Strike, Adaptive Strike, Rend, Dismember, Fury, Overpower, Assault, and then the basic attack. It's also worth putting our Stun Witch's backhand on the action bar, and the same can be said about the Barge ability, but they shouldn't be within the Revolution bar. Those are going to be abilities that we're going to manually fire throughout the fight when we need them. And then our two-handed Revolution bar is going to look like this. We're going to go Meteor Strike, Adaptive Strike, Rend, Hurricane, Fury, Overpower, Dismember, and then the basic attack. And then same as before, we're also going to include Barge as well as our backhand, which is our stun. Setting this up is super easy. It literally takes 2 seconds. You're going to go into your settings by hitting escape, and then go into combat and action bar, and inside that submenu, you're going to find Action Bar Binding. And then all you have to do is take 2 bars. The first one, you're going to call melee dual wield, and the other one, you're going to call melee two-handed. You're going to make sure that your main action bar is swapping, and then it's as simple as setting up the correct bars to swap when you have the correct weapon on. So for example, the bar that I just set up for my dual wields was action bar 9, so I'm just going to make sure that that's the bar it's going to swap to, and then my two-handed bar was bar 8, so I'm going to make sure that it's set up just like that. And once you've set this up, it should be really easy to test if it's working correctly, because all you're going to do is swap to your Drygors and see if your main action bar swaps as well. And the same can be said with the Dragon Rider Lance. As soon as I equip it, the bar is going to swap too. Okay, we've got a couple more things to do before we get started, and then we're going to head into the waves and cruise to the easiest Zuk cape of our lives. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to light some Elder Logs, because it is worth getting HP boost before entering the fight. This could be the Desert Pantheon aura before it gets deleted. This could be the Thermal Spot from Anachronia if you have it, as well as getting a Bonfire boost to give you a little bit of extra HP. The next thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be using both Powder of Penance as well as Powder of Protection. Powder of Penance is going to give me some prayer points as I take damage, which is going to be really helpful with this setup because I'm not bringing that much prayer in my invent, and then the Powder of Protection is going to make my protection prayers 10% more effective, which is really awesome. I also want to mention that this powder does not stack with the Amulet of Souls or the Essence of Finality, so if you have an EOF or an Amulet of Souls, you can just wear the amulet and it has the same thing built in, but if you're on something like an Amulet of Zealots like I am, this is a really good option. And then there's one more thing we're going to do before we get started. I'm going to teleport to the main plaza of the Tazar city with my Tokkul-zuk ring. I'm going to make sure that it's recharged, and then I'm going to teleport to the fight cauldron, and I'm going to enter it. Once you've entered the fight cauldron, you can actually donate Tokkul to give yourself extra damage reduction while wearing obsidian armor, and it's going to give you an extra 10% damage reduction. You can do this up to 3 times for 60 minutes. This run should only take 20 or 25 minutes, so I wouldn't bother doing this 3 times, but doing it twice is absolutely worthwhile, and it's going to make you take even less damage. Before I go through the invent setup, I also want to mention that I did this run on a Hellhound with Hellhound Scrolls, and that's going to be your best overall option in terms of just stacking damage reduction as much as you possibly can. We've got 55% damage reduction just from having the obsidian armor, and then the Hellhound's going to give us another 20% on top of that. When you add things like protection prayers on top of that as well, you end up in a situation where we basically aren't going to be getting hit very much for this entire run, and it's actually crazy how effective this is. And last but not least, before we get started, let's talk about the invent setup. I've got 2 overloads as well as 2 prayer renewal potions. I've got 2 super restores as well as 4 super prayer potions. It's very important that you bring at least 1 super restore, as you are going to need it during the Zuk phase to restore your constitution, as Zuk has an attack that lowers it, but we'll talk about that later on. I also have an adrenaline potion that is completely optional, the ancient elven ritual shard, which is also completely optional but is quite nice to have, and then I've also got a weapon poison +++ because it combos very well with Cinderbane gloves. Outside of that, as we talked about before, I've got my lance equipped, and then I've got my Drygors in my invent as my dual wields, but I also have a shield as well as some vulnerability mobs. The shield is also optional, but it is helpful to have, and it is going to save you some food, as there are a couple moments where it's worth putting it on to use a defensive ability. But of course, if you have trained necromancy and you have access to bone shield, that is an even better option, and then you can just skip the shield entirely. Last but not least, vulnerability bombs are going to give you 10% increased damage for 1 minute, and there are some points during the fight where there are some DPS checks where if you want to make the revolution bar a little bit more consistent, it can be helpful to chuck a vuln bomb. The last thing we're going to put on our invent is a collection of Saradome and brews. In reality, you could do a combination of food and brews. You could do just food, you could do just brews, but because the amount of damage we're taking in this method is so low at a time, the odds of us getting like comboed out are extremely low. So I went for the brews just to maximize the amount of HP per invent space. But with that said, that is our entire pre-fight, our entire invent setup, and we're now ready to go. As we jump into wave 1, I also did want to mention you probably don't want auto retaliate on during this, and you want to just click on all of your next targets. The benefit of clicking manually is sometimes auto retaliate can run you into Narnia, and you can end up taking a lot of damage because of it. So while this is a fully revolution guide, you do want to just click on the targets around you and attack them manually. The one other thing I'm going to mention is that if you've completed the 1 piercing note quest, the devotion ability is extremely helpful, and we are going to be using it a couple times during this run. If you don't have it, don't worry about it, because the alternative to devotion is just eating a little bit of food. And then last but not least, there's one other ability that is important to have somewhere on one of your action bars, and that is freedom. We're not going to use it until we get to the Zuk part of the fight, but there is a mechanic of Zuk's that we're going to want to use the freedom ability after, but we'll talk about that when we get to it. But with that out of the way, why don't we get started? I'd like to start wave 1 northeast of the spawn point, and we're just going to wait for the melee mobs to spawn in and start attacking me. For wave 1, we're going to be praying melee because everything in this wave melees, and we're just going to start attacking the Zakhar Hers. In general, because prayer flicking is difficult, we try to stick to 1 overhead prayer per wave, and for wave 1, we're going to want to pray protect melee. You're also going to notice here that I'm using the vampirism aura, and the reason I'm using the vampirism aura is 1, it helps a good bit, and 2, it is going to be turned into an aspect later on in the year. And when it gets turned into an aspect, instead of activating the vampirism aura, you're just going to want to be using the vampirism aspect. It will be functionally the same, it'll work the same way, it just won't be in the aura slot. But with that said, we've entered wave 1, and you're going to notice right away that I am taking almost no damage. My HP, even when I'm getting absolutely mobbed by the melees, is just not going down at all, and that's sort of the benefit of this method. We've stacked so much damage reduction that you're going to find that our character, even with these relatively low stats, is going to be incredibly difficult to kill. With wave 1 out of the way, why don't we head into wave 2? Wave 2 has a couple rangers, but it's still mostly meleeers, so we're going to keep our prey melee on for the entirety of this wave. Although, of course, if you're being attacked by rangers, you're welcome to switch to the range prayer, but I found it wasn't worth the effort, and we're trying to keep it simple here as much as possible. But because everything in this wave is melee except for these 2 rangers, and we're praying protect melee, I would prioritize killing the 2 rangers first, just by killing the first one, and then clicking on the second one and killing the second one. After that, we're in a good spot to just stand where we are and deal with all of the other mobs around us. One other thing I want to mention about the Zuk run is that if there are bats currently attacking you, 1, watch your prayer points, because they're going to sap your prayer points very quickly, and 2, you probably want to target them first and prioritize killing them if they're on you, because they are going to mess up your damage output a lot, and they'll burn through some of your supplies. wise. But with that said, we have just cruised through the first 2 waves, and we haven't had to do really anything yet. But why don't we head into wave 3? For wave 3, I like to start this one a little more further south because there's a bat that spawns right at the beginning all the way due south. Start there, and then we're going to keep our melee prey on for the entirety of this wave, and we're just going to start working on the meleeers. Wave 3 is very similar to Wave 2 in the sense that there are 2 rangers, one spawns east and one spawns west. Once they spawn, considering you're praying melee, you're going to want to just get rid of the 2 rangers. So I'm going to start by moving east, I'm going to kill that ranger, and then I'm going to move west and then kill the west ranger as well. That's the first ranger down, then I'm going to go kill the west one too. One other thing that I found in doing research for this guide that is really funny that isn't terribly important, but these 3 meleeers actually can't attack you when they get stuck like this. And this happens every single time if you lure it like this, just by targeting the ranger. It doesn't really matter, they won't do a lot of damage to me, but I just thought it was really funny that they basically just stand and have a little meeting in the middle of the run. But with that said, we're going to kill the ranger, and after that, we're going to kill the meleeers and head on over to wave 4. One other thing I did want to mention is if you take a look at my buff bar, I am also using the attack boosting prayer as well as the strength boosting prayer. I found the defense boosting prayer didn't really matter for this, but this is a good time to mention that stat boosting prayers are very helpful, especially when you have lower stats, because we're getting increased accuracy, which is also going to lead to extra damage. Okay, that is the end of wave 3, and now we're heading into wave 4, which is our first of 3 challenge waves. These challenge waves work a little bit differently from the regular waves, as on these waves, we're going to have a number of mobs that all use the same combat style spawning in, and then you're going to have 3 Igneous mobs, which are like a big buffed up version of the originals. You have to kill the 3 Igneous mobs to unlock your special action button, which is a button that's going to pop up on your screen. And then once you do that and press your special action button, you're going to be able to actually attack Zuk on his throne and do 50,000 damage to him to continue on through the fight. So all that to say, this wave is a little bit different than the other ones. You don't technically have to kill any of the other mobs outside of the 3 Igneous ones, but I found especially with this lower tier setup, it wasn't an absolutely terrible idea to just kill some of the other mobs, or at very minimum, position myself in such a way that my Har Akens were actually hitting some of the mobs as well, just to give me some extra damage and some extra healing, and to minimize the amount of targets hitting me. The special thing about these 3 melee Igneous mobs, though, is that in order to deal full damage to them, you actually have to hit them with a stun, and that is why backhand is on our bar. You'll see the pop-up on screen that says stunning the Igneous tzkal-zuk Har has made it more vulnerable, and basically, if you don't stun it with backhand, you will not be able to kill it. It has a shield, and it will continue to regen its HP. So that's why this stun's on the bar, and the only time we're going to use it in this Zuk run is when we have this specific Igneous mob to deal with, as you gotta stun in order to start dealing damage. We've got 2 of our 3 Igneous mobs down, so now we're going to finish off the 3rd one, hit him with the stun, and let the Revo bar do the rest of the work. As soon as this monster dies, you're going to see my special action button appear on screen, and I've highlighted it there, and as soon as we press that button, which can also be keybound in your control settings by the way, we'll have a short window of time where we can deal damage to Zuk. So I'm now going to mosey on over to Zuk's feet, and you're also going to notice that I've thrown on my Dragors because it's time to do some single target damage. Something you're going to notice in this bar configuration is that Berserk is the first ability. At this point, if you wanted to manually press it, you could, but you could also just continue to attack Zuk before hitting the special action button until your character naturally uses Meteor Strike and then uses Berserk. You could literally just wait for this to happen and continue to attack Zuk if you'd like to, but for me, I'm at a point where I'm already full adrenaline because Meteor Strike went off on my final Igneous mob, so we're simply going to attack Zuk just like that, and my character is going to Berserk automatically. This is also an opportunity to throw a vulnerability bomb and use your adrenaline potion if you'd like to, but as you'll see in a second here, it doesn't actually terribly matter. I'm going to press the special action button, and my Revo bar is going to do the rest, and it's going to do the 50,000 damage we need to proceed to the next stage of the fight. But there's also one other thing that I wanted to mention here, which is that while I didn't fail this DPS check at all, there were a couple points where it was a bit of a close call, and I do want to say here that if you fail this DPS check, it doesn't actually matter at all. The only thing that's going to happen is the Igneous Wave 4 is going to repeat itself, but you're still eligible for a Zuk cape, and you don't fail whatsoever. So really doing it in one cycle is more of a time save than anything else. It doesn't matter at all for the cape. But with our Igneous Wave 4 complete, it's time to head into Wave 5, which is our first challenge wave. There are 3 challenge waves during the Zuk fight, and interestingly enough, you can actually fail all 3 of them and still get a Zuk cape, because the conditions for getting a Zuk cape are not to do it flawlessly or to complete all the challenges. All you have to do is do the entire run without banking or leaving and using the checkpoint system. And because of that, the easiest and most simple way to proceed here is to quite simply fail the challenge. In this first challenge, we've got 5 melee mobs that we need to kill, and you're going to see here that we're not going to be able to kill all of them. I'm going to put my my 2H on, and we're just going to attack as many as we possibly can, but it doesn't actually matter if we kill them or we don't, so we're just going to not kill them, and you'll see for each mob remaining at the end of this, we're going to take a little bit of damage, but because we're wearing obsidian armor, it doesn't really matter either, and the damage is going to be very minuscule. If you weren't wearing obsidian armor though, this would matter a little bit more, and I would recommend using a power burst of vitality potion at this point just to mitigate how much damage you're taking. But functionally, in this run, we're going to be failing all of the challenges. I'm also going to mention that if you wanted to not fail this challenge and you were actually keen on passing it to unlock hard mode Zuk, you can do that as well with this method. The one thing I would do differently though is I would manually cast Berserk, and I would actually do it after the point where you're finished attacking Zuk's feet, and I do it at the start of the challenge. In doing so, you'll have enough damage to clear off the mobs, but it didn't make sense to do in this video for the easiest Zuk cape in RuneScape history and the easiest Zuk cape possible. This guide is really all about doing the absolute bare minimum, and that's sort of the whole point here. With that said, we're out of wave 5 and we've entered wave 6. Wave 6 is an interesting wave because we're actually going to encounter our first Jad, and the Jad is going to spawn all the way south. Something I'm going to do as well is I'm going to mark on screen an area that I don't want to go at the start of wave 6 because I want the Jad to remain stuck behind the area where he spawns. If you split the arena in half along the northern line, I want to stay all the way west and anywhere in that western area that I marked on screen, but if you go east at this point, what's going to happen is the Jad that's going to spawn in is going to be able to get to me and attack me, and we don't want that. We want to just deal with the rangers first, as that's going to make our life a lot easier. We're also praying protect range for this wave because the people that are currently attacking me are ranging, and we should have a chance to get through most of the rangers before the 2 meleeers spawn in and get started attacking us. You're going to see that there was a bat near me, so we've taken out the bat, and now we're safe spotting this meleeer with our lance. But of course, I'm still praying range because we're trying to keep it to 1 different prayer per wave as much as we possibly can. Next up, we're going to let Revo take the wheel and just deal some damage to the remaining 3 mobs attacking me. And you're going to notice here that we're taking a little bit of damage, but all in all, it's still pretty minuscule, all things considered. And just like that, we've cleared the bulk of the wave. And then last but not least, we've got a bat and of course, a Jad. Something that's really cool about this method that I'm very stoked about is we can actually fully face tank the Jad hits if we so desire to. So as much as you probably should flick the Jads whenever you can, if you miss a Jad flick, you're going to take about 3,000 damage, and that's it, which makes this setup really, really sick. My strong recommendation for this method is to just run up and attack the Jad with 1 different type of prayer on. But something I wanted to mention is because we're using melee, the Jads actually can melee us on a 1-tile range, which sounds complicated, but it's really not. All you need to do here is if you attack a Jad and you run up to it with your Dragon Rider Lance or your 2H weapon and you get meleeed by the Jad, all you gotta do is step 1 tile back and resume attacking, and he won't be able to melee you anymore. So that's the easiest and the best way to make sure that you're not in melee range. But outside of that, if you want to just camp 1 protection prayer for all of the Jads, you quite literally can, and you still won't use any food. You'll see in a second here, this Jad is about to mage me, and I'm just not even gonna bother flicking it, and you take a 3k hit. And remember, every time we deal damage with this setup, we're also gaining more HP back as well. But overall, if you can, it's a really good opportunity to practice your prayer flicks, and I would recommend at least trying to flick the Jads whenever you can. But I wanted to show what happens if you miss a flick because it really doesn't matter with this setup, and you can miss as many Jad flicks as you need. Just remember, if you run into some HP issues, put the food in and you'll be good to go. Okay, with wave 6 done, we're going to be heading over to wave 7, and I like to start this wave north, in the same spot that we were at the start of wave 6. In this wave, we've got a mage and then 2 bats that are going to spawn right away, and then after that, it's predominantly rangers the rest of the way, which is why I'm once again praying protection from ranged. Once the bats get on me, we're going to focus on them, and then we're just going to start attacking the first ranger. I'm also going to mention that if the meleeer doesn't get stuck, you'd probably want to kill the meleeer at this point. If you wanted to, this would be a really good wave to use the devotion ability if you so desire to do so. It's going to make it so that you can't take any damage from range attacks for 10 seconds, but every target you kill is actually going to extend it by an additional 5 seconds per for a maximum of 2. So because of that, really, we're going to be impervious to range damage for 20 seconds, which is going to save us a good bit of damage taken and a good bit of food. I'm also going to mention that I did the quest to unlock devotion right before this run, and we did 3 runs prior to this without it, so it's absolutely not needed, but it does make it a whole lot smoother. And you're going to notice that for the majority of this run, my HP basically stays above 2/3 the entire time without having to eat or really do anything else, and devotion just helps with that and makes it a little more consistent. But that's wave 7, just like that, just by clicking on the next monster. And for wave 8, we're going to do something very similar to wave 6 and 7. We're going to be starting right by Zuk's feet all the way north. This wave is the opposite of the previous though, where you have a ranger that spawns north instead of a mage, and then you have 2 mages that spawn west and east. But instead of what we did last time where we started by focusing on the monster that spawned north, this time around, because there are a bunch of rangers that are going to spawn in, we're actually going to focus on taking care of the mages first because of our overhead prayers. We really want to focus on camping prey range this entire run, so in order to do that, kill the mages first so we take less damage overall. Something also going to notice is that the meleeer is stuck all the way south, and that is an extremely helpful thing that we want to prioritize as well. You really just want to minimize how many combat styles you're being hit by at once, so getting the meleeer stuck is just a really helpful thing to do, and you can do so by just staying in the areas that I've marked on screen right now. Basically, the same half median that we did on wave 6 for the Jad. With the mages out of the way, we're now just going to start killing the rangers, and obviously, if you want to position yourself in such a way that some of the rangers are not attacking you consistently, you're welcome to do so, but I also found it wasn't completely necessary. But this is also another wave where if you want to, devotion is a very helpful ability to have, and you're more than welcome to hit the devotion button if you'd like to. One other thing I'm going to mention about the big rangers, which is like one other functional mechanics, is that the rangers deal more damage every time they attack you without moving at all. So as soon as they plant their feet and they start hitting you, you can start taking more and more damage from them. I found it didn't really matter, and it wasn't something I had to pay attention to when I was doing this method, but in general, if you ever see a ranger with a ton of stacks, which I've highlighted on screen, the best thing you can possibly do is just go somewhere else in the arena to force them to move. And as soon as the ranger takes a step, all of its damage stacks are going to go back to 0, and they'll start working their way up from 0 again, not doing very much damage. I think it's important in a video like this where we're really putting in a crazy minimal effort to still talk about the mechanics of the monsters in case somebody watching maybe doesn't have the same gear, doesn't have the same setup, or maybe they're just interested in knowing how these monsters and how the Zuk Fight actually works beyond just the things you have to bring in order to get an easy cape. So there are going to be some points of this video where I'm mentioning things about the Zuk Fight that you may not necessarily need for this method, but you might need it in the future. You never know. With that said though, we're going to continue dealing with the rangers, but something you're going to notice here is I don't want to cross the area that I've marked on screen that is safe to not lure this meleeer. So instead, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to make that last ranger come to me, and I'm going to do that by just walking in the opposite direction so that the ranger moves towards me a little bit. And then I'm going to simply go back on the ranger, but without luring the meleeer onto me. We've killed our last rangers, so now we've got one meleeer left before the second of 3 Igneous waves. And this time around, it's going to be an Igneous range wave. For this wave, instead of starting north, I actually like to start southeast, and this was one of the waves where I would actually recommend killing all of the mobs in the wave instead of just focusing on the Igneous ones. The reason for this is the damage that they do kind of stacks up, and you don't really want to have like 8 rangers just attacking you the entire time as you're running around. For the Igneous Rangers, unlike the meleeers where you need a stun, for these ones, all you need to do is use a powerful ability. These were formerly called threshold abilities, but now they're called enhanced abilities. And some examples of the powerful abilities required to take down their shields are things like Har Aken, Assault, Overpower, or the recast on Dismember. Any of those will break the shield, and then you'll be able to deal full damage. But you don't even have to think about it because you've got some powerful abilities on your revolution bar, and it's going to do it for you. That's our first Igneous mob taken care of. Now we're going to head on over to the second one, and you're going to see here that they're stacked in a really nice way here, so that my area of effect abilities like Har Aken are just going to do a lot of damage to a lot of the rangers overall, and that's the main reason I like to start this wave southeast. It just sets up the wave really nicely to be able to do a lot of damage to the side mobs without having to like run around and target them specifically. That's our second Igneous mob down, but before we head on over to the third one, I'm going to do a little bit of damage to the other mobs just to reduce the damage I'm taking. We're not going for any kind of speed record here, even though this entire cape is only going to take 25 minutes, but I would rather take less damage and not have to worry about quite as much. Once we've thinned out the crowd, I'm going to target the final Igneous wave. We're going to take him out with our revolution bar, and then, just like we did at the end of wave 4, we're going to start targeting Zuk. Something you're going to notice this time as well is, unlike after wave 4 where our revolution bar had just perfectly set us up to use Berserk, this time around, we are not on a meteor strike, I am not on 100% adrenaline, and we are not ready for Berserk, but fortunately what we could do is we could just attack Zuk here without using our special action button until our revolution bar puts us in a situation that we want to be. So the revolution bar just used meteor strike there, so at this point we're building. I'm going to throw on the Drygors, but you're going to see here that meteor strike is going to build me up to Berserk, and just like that, we're good to go, the exact same as after wave 4, even though we had a completely different start point. Same thing as before, I'm going to throw a vulnerability bomb, and I'm also going to drink an adrenaline potion. We're just going to deal some damage to Zuk. I mentioned this during wave 4, but I'm going to say it again here too, which is that it does not matter if you're not able to do 50,000 damage in one cycle. If you're not able to, the Igneous wave is just going to repeat itself, but the Igneous wave doesn't cost you any food or supplies, so really you just go through the rangers again, kill them again, and finish off whatever remaining damage you needed. But with that said, we finished wave 9 and we're heading in to our second challenge wave. This challenge wave is very annoying with lower stats. It's actually extremely difficult because this is the Unbreakable, and he's very hard to hit for 2 reasons. First off, he is extremely tanky. You'll see on screen here that I only have 58% hit chance against him, which is going to make my life a little bit difficult. But the other thing that makes him a difficult target is he will not take damage from any hit splats that are below 3,000. And because of that, completing this challenge would be very difficult, and you'll see he's basically nulling every single ability I'm using. I'm just gonna let him blow up on me, and we're going to fail the second challenge. If you wanted to complete the second challenge, what I would do is I would actually 2-cycle Zuk's feet and take that a little bit slower, and then I would save a Berserk and hope that a Berserk plus an Overpower plus an Assault would be able to get it done. But honestly, if your setup is as low level as this one, it might not be super feasible to do. But that's okay, because you get a cape even if you fail the challenge. So with that said, why don't we head in to wave 11, which is a double Jad Wave. On this wave, the Jad spawn northeast and northwest, and because of that, we want to go far away from there. So this time around, we're actually going to make a beeline all the way to the southeastern safe spot in the Zuk arena, and we're going to target this first bat. But I'm also going to mention it is very important to move quickly here. The Jad spawn pretty quickly, so this would also be a good opportunity to use abilities like Surge or Dive if you have it unlocked, but I don't have it unlocked on this account. This time around, though, we're actually going to be going all the way to the southeastern safe spot, and we're going to go all the way into the cubby here so that the mages that I've marked on screen aren't able to attack me. And once they've been lured into melee distance, I'm now going to step out, I'm going to pray protect magic, and we're going to start attacking these mages. You're going to notice here that the Jads are currently not attacking me and they are safely lured, but in a second, you're going to notice that I'm actually going to step out to attack this bat because I don't want this bat draining my prayer. But when I step out to attack this bat, the Jad is actually going to be able to see me and attack me. That's something to look out for and be careful of, and you are going to see in a second that I will rotate my camera to take a look and actually notice the Jad attacking me. But I also did want to mention that it is okay if you tank a Jad hit. It's not the end of the world. It's not going to one-shot you, but you do need to be mindful. If a Jad is attacking you, either try to get those prayer flicks or just step back into the same safe spot we came from, and he won't be able to attack us back where we were before. But with that said, I'm just going to elect to flick the Jad, and we're going to continue letting our revolution bar take the wheel, and we're going to clear out all of these mobs so that all we have left is 1 mage and 2 Jads. And just like that, we're down to our 1 mage and our 2 Jads. And at this point, I'm actually going to do something else with the Jads that is really interesting. I think a lot of the time people see Jads and they panic and they get the Jad hands because there's that fear that if you miss a single prayer flick, you're going to die. But with this setup, that isn't the case. So if you wanted to, you could use that shield and actually throw a resonance to get yourself all the way back up to full HP and use that Jad for a heal. And that's what I'm going to do here. You absolutely don't need to do this. Obviously, my HP is fine, but I don't want to show this as a very viable technique and a way to actually gain HP on the Jad waves regardless of what your setup is. Now that our HP is back to full, we're just going to go back to attacking the Jad. Try to prayer flick it if you want to, or if you can, but if you can't, once again, don't worry about it. This setup is pretty goated. That's our Jad down, so now we're going to target the mage, and then we've got 1 final Jad for this wave before we head in to wave 12 and 13, which are 2 of the more difficult waves in the entire run, but if you do them the right way, you won't find them terribly difficult. Earlier in this video, I mentioned that the Jads can melee you on a 1-tile range, so if you're directly in front of them, they can melee you, and that's exactly what I'm going to notice here. I'm going to step in, I'm going to start attacking the Jad, and all you're going to do is if you see the Jad melee you, like he's about to do here, the Jad melees me, I take less than 3,000 damage, just step back 1 tile, and just like that, he will not be able to melee you anymore, so you can go back to having a much easier prayer flicking experience. And just like that, we've made it to the end of wave 11, and you're also going to notice if you're looking over at my invent that we haven't used a single food up to this point. We've used just over 1 singular prayer potion, and we're absolutely chilling this far. But let's head into wave 12. Wave 12 is probably the most difficult wave of the bunch, and for this one, you're going to see an absolute ton of mages spawning in, but you're also going to see 2 rangers, and the rangers can do a lot of damage, and they spawn both east and west. The first thing you want to do is target the northern bat, and then once the northern bat is done, what I like to do is I like to target the western ranger. You can put on range pray here if you want to, but as soon as these mages spawn, you're going to want to put on magic prayer because the mage's damage really starts to add up. Once I've taken out this first ranger, I'm actually going to do the exact same that we did on wave 7, which is I'm actually going to target the second ranger as well and get rid of him before he has a chance to plant his feet for too long and deal too much damage. And in doing that, I'm going to make sure that everything else attacking me is hitting me with the same combat style, which is really convenient. I also use the devotion ability here, which you could use, but if you don't want to use devotion, you could also just eat a food as your HP gets a little bit lower. Next up, we're going to focus on targeting the bat because the bat is currently attacking us. And outside of that, we are absolutely cruising to the end of wave 12. I'm also going to mention that if you wanted to eat here, you're more than welcome to. Realistically, we have way more food than we're going to need. We actually didn't end up using any food in this run, so I was more trying to see if this method would get us a no food run, so I decided not to eat, but realistically, anytime your HP gets below half, you're more than welcome to eat some food. You're also going to notice that I saw my Hellhound getting a little bit low on HP, so I'm just going to spam click on my familiar scroll and heal my Hellhound all the way back up to full so that he can continue to tank another day. And just like that, wave 12, which is the hardest wave in this entire thing, is complete. So with that said, let's get into wave 13, which has the same makeup as wave 12, but this time around, the 2 rangers spawn all the way north and all the way south. And because one of the rangers spawns south, we're going to do the exact same thing we did for the first Jad lure, which is that we're going to stay on the median that I've marked on screen. We're basically splitting the map all the way from north to south, and as long as we stay on that that western half of the map, the southern ranger is going to spawn in and is going to immediately get stuck so he can't attack us. Outside of that though, it's going to be exactly the same as the previous wave. Throw on the magic prayer, use devotion whenever you want to during this wave, and you should be in a really good spot to get to the end of wave 13 without using any supplies or anything. I also don't like to get too specific with lures, especially in a video like this one, but I did want to mention, you can use the rocks around you situationally to avoid damage. As an example, if I was attacking this monster right here from further north, some of the monsters that are on the other side of that rock would be able to see me and be able to hit me, but they can't because of where I'm standing. So it's always very valid to just kind of move your character around a little bit, see what's able to attack you, and try to save yourself some damage that way. But with that said, it of course isn't necessary and doesn't matter because of the way that we've set up this wave. Next thing we're going to do though is deal with these last couple mages, but you're also going to notice that we're pretty close to the limit of how far I could run before I aggro the ranger. So once this mage dies, I'm actually going to run backwards, which is a thing that we did earlier in the Zuk run as well, just to let the mage come to me. And that way we're not going to have to deal with being attacked by mage damage and range damage at the same time. Something I really like about this method is there are a couple little techniques we're using to save ourselves damage, and they're pretty much useful for the entire run. We basically use the same tech consistently throughout the entire thing and use more or less the same lures and the same principles the whole time too. Now that we've killed the last mage, throw on that range spray, take out that ranger, and we should be good to go. You're also going to notice that this ranger should be able to hit me a little bit harder because he's currently sitting on 100 stacks. If you wanted to, you could stand directly underneath him, and in doing so, he would actually lose all of his stacks, but even at 100 stacks, he's not hitting me very much because of my setup. So with that said, wave 13 is done, and we're making it now to our final Igneous wave. This is the Igneous mage wave, and it's a pretty interesting one. Not only do you get a bunch of mages that spawn in that deal a lot of damage, but you also have 3 Igneous mages that are spawned in these bubbles. And in order to break these bubbles, all you have to do is deal damage to them from inside of the bubble, which fortunately, as a melee user, is very easy to do, or conversely, very hard to not do, because you can't really melee them without getting into the bubble anyway. But something else I wanted to mention about this wave in particular is you can take a lot of damage from the smaller mages, and my recommendation is actually to use these Igneous mages as a blocker, because as an example, the monster I am currently attacking is actually preventing the other monsters that I've marked on screen that are running towards me from seeing me or dealing any damage to me. So you can actually stand completely behind them and you'll save yourself a lot of damage. This is another wave that you can use devotion on if you have it, but if not, you could also just eat food, or probably not even eat food. You might just be fine. But something else I want to mention is very similar to the previous Igneous wave where we attacked and killed most of the rangers on the wave, not just the big ones. We're gonna do the same thing here because these mages also gain extra damage over time, so it makes a lot more sense just to clear them early, get them out of the way, and that way we don't need to worry about it. We can cruise to the end of the Igneous wave and get prepped for the future waves as well, because the next couple waves do get a little bit dicey and are a little bit more involved. That's Igneous Mage 2 taken care of, and then we're gonna head on over to the third one and do the exact same thing. Something else I want to mention while I'm slowly running up to the next mob is you can also use abilities like Surge, Dive, or Barge to get to your target faster if you want to. I just chose not to because we're really trying to keep our manual inputs to the bare minimum during this run. But with that said, there's our final Igneous Mage taken out, so it's time to get onto Zuk's feet. We've swapped bars, my Revo bar has used Berserk, I've consumed my Adrenaline Potion, and now we're just letting Revo take the wheel and getting our 50,000 damage done. I also applied a Vulnerability Bomb, which is never a terrible thing to do, and yeah, we're just chilling, seeing if we can get 50k damage done. And now we're heading into the third and final challenge wave. For this final challenge, you're going to have 3 mobs that are going to attack you, and you're going to be hit a total of 4 times. And the test is to see if you can mitigate all of the damage. By far, the easiest way to do this is just to resonance the first hit and then use the barricade ability for hits 2, 3, and 4. But once again, these challenges don't matter for getting a Zuk cape, and you can quite simply tank all of the hits because of the setup we have. If you're not wearing obsidian armor though, this would be a good opportunity to use a power burst of vitality to save yourself some damage. You're gonna see here for the first projectile going towards me, I'm gonna use resonance just to save me a bit of damage. And at this point, that first blue hit is gonna be magic type. If you want to flick to prey magic, you're gonna take almost no damage, but if you let it hit you, it's also not gonna take too much of your HP. Last but not least, the final hit's gonna hit me at 2500. And just like that, we have failed challenge 3 successfully. And we're heading in to wave 16, which is the triple Jad Wave. Exactly the same as the double Jad wave, we need to absolutely book it to the southeast quarter for this because 3 Jads are going to spawn all around my character. So we're going to go to the exact same safe spot as before, all the way to the southeast, and we're just going to let the closest Jad come to us. The other 2 are going to get lured. And just like that, we've been attacked by magic. I'm going to pray magic, and we're just going to click on the Jad. You're also going to notice here that I am not full HP, and it's a good opportunity to decide if you want to eat up. If you're confident with your prayer flicking, absolutely do what I'm doing here and just continue flicking it, and you're going to heal passively just with your melee kit, your vampirism aura or aspect, and your scripture. But if you want to, you can absolutely go for a resonance or eat some food, both very valid options. And you got to remember too, we are not worried about kill speed here. You can go at really whatever pace you want, and you're also going to notice here that even though we're almost done the Zuk run and we only have a couple waves left, I still have another full overload and another full super prayer renewal. So realistically, we could be in here for another 40 minutes if we needed to, and it would be completely fine. And that was done intentionally with this setup, just to make sure that you don't feel pressure to like move super quickly, take a bunch of extra damage, make a bunch of mistakes. You can go as slow and low as you need here. With that said, Jad 1 is down. Let's take on Jad 2. Jad 2 has hit me with a melee swipe, which actually hit close to a 4K. So we're going to step 1 back, just like we talked about before. Now we know that this Jad will not be able to melee us anymore. I'm also going to mention one more time as we get later into the fight that it is absolutely worthwhile to take a look at your Hellhound and watch its HP and use the scrolls periodically. You don't have to do it all the time, but at least every 4 or 5 minutes, it's worth clicking those Hellhound scrolls just to make sure that your Hellhound has nice high HP. We've got one final Jad to take care of, and then we're going to have to deal with Har Aken, which, as you're going to see in a second, is not terribly difficult with this setup. Once this Jad goes down, we're going to equip our Drygors, and then Har Aken is either going to spawn all the way east or all the way west. It's completely random which side he spawns on. We're going to throw on our Drygors. I'm also going to drink an adrenaline potion because we may as well, and we're just going to get ready for Har Aken to spawn. Har Aken has spawned east, so why don't we surge on over to Har Aken and start attacking, and I'm also going to chuck a vulnerability bomb. And at this point, Revolution is literally going to take the wheel and do 100% of this for us, and as a spoiler alert, this is actually going to be a one-cycled Har Aken as well. But there is one mechanic that we do want to look out for, and it's on screen right now. You're going to see that there's bubbling lava next to Har Aken that I've marked on screen, and you're going to see that at certain points, a projectile is going to fly out of that lava, which you're going to see in just a second here. And there it is. And whenever you see a projectile fly out from next to Har Aken, what you want to do is just step 2 tiles either north or south. As long as you move 2 tiles, it's not going to hit you at all. But if it does hit you, it's going to do a low amount of damage, but it's also going to take away your adrenaline, which is going to make your hopes of a one cycle a little bit less likely. But outside of that, though, we are quite literally just attacking Har Aken, not doing anything else. Revolution is doing everything, and we're just looking out for those projectiles so that we can continue stepping back and forth between 2 tiles to get the wave done. And just like that, we have not only one-cycled Har Aken, but we've one-cycled Har Aken with our Revo bar, not a single manual input, and we've actually ended the Har Aken kill on more HP than we started it on. So this Revo bar really is absolutely goated for this. But I do want to talk about what happens if you're not able to one-cycle Har Aken before we talk about the actual Zuk fight, which, as you'll see in a second, goes very similarly to the Har Aken part. In this iteration, I didn't quite have the damage to deal with Har Aken, and because of that, you're going to see that he disappears back into the lava, and then he's going to stay down for either 45 seconds or 1 minute. We'll put the right one on screen. If you don't quite have the damage to one-cycle Har Aken, what's going to happen is he's going to disappear into the lava, and at this point, we're just going to continue to build on these tentacles. You actually don't have to kill these tentacles at all, but the benefit in killing them is we have lifesteal going like crazy, especially with our Revolution bar and the bleeds on it, and because of that, it's worth just killing stuff, really anything we can attack just to get some HP back, and that way we can no-food this whole scenario. But while Har Aken is hiding, there's one thing we need to look out for that just happened here. You'll see a pop-up on your screen that says, tzkal-zuk Har Aken is bombarding you, look out. And when this happens, he's going to launch a bomb from the sky that's going to go all over your character in an X shape. And because it's in an X shape, the easiest way to dodge it is just to step 4 tiles either directly north, south, east, or west of your character. And if you do that, you will not get hit whatsoever. In this instance, I elected to use the Surge ability, which is absolutely overkill, but as long as you step 4 tiles directly north, south, east, west, it won't hit you whatsoever. But outside of that, we're going to continue attacking our tentacles, and the next thing we're going to do is just wait for Har Aken to spawn back in so that we can finish him off. And a few seconds later, we're going to get dive bombed one more time. Har Aken is going to surface. We're going to finish off the last 12,000 HP, and then it's going to be time for Zuk. So I'm going to cut back to the other video. Once Har Aken goes down, it's time to take on Zuk. He's going to get up off of his seat, and he's going to start attacking you himself, which might feel a little daunting, but in reality, this might be one of the easiest parts of the guide, because this setup is going to keep our HP basically at full for the vast majority of it, and all we've got to do is look out for a couple mechanics, and we'll be good to go the rest of the way. Make sure that you're potted up, your stat boosting prayers are on, and it's time to attack Zuk. The first thing Zuk's going to do is he's going to say, "You will break beneath me," and he's going to hit us with his Zuk sword. And then you're going to see, if you look at my debuff bar, that there is a burn burning debuff on my bar, and this is going to continue to ramp up and hit us until we clear it. But fortunately, the way to clear it is very easy. Whenever Zuk says you will break beneath me, just use the freedom ability. Just like that, you're going to see I use freedom, and we have cleared the debuff. After that, we're just going to continue letting our revolution bar cook the boss and deal some damage, but we are getting ready for the next mechanic where Zuk is going to say suffer. When Zuk says suffer, we're going to get another thing on our debuff bar that has 15 stacks. And this is the mechanic that reduces your maximum HP over time. And this is the one where if you don't move, you're not going to notice it, but all of a sudden your max HP is going to creep lower and lower until you're basically getting one shot every time he hits you. But to deal with it, it's very simple. The 15 stacks on my debuff bar each represent one tile of movement. So as long as I move a total of 15 tiles, it's going to clear immediately. So what I choose to do here is I choose to use the surge ability, and then I'm just going to run back to where I originally was until it is completely off my debuff bar. And as soon as it is, we're just going to go back to attacking Zuk like nothing happened. If you're a little slower on dealing with this, you might notice at this point that your max HP goes down a bit, in which case that's what the super restores are for. There's a lot of room for error baked into this, so if you mess it up, just drink a super restore, you'll be good to go. Those are the first two mechanics dealt with, but the next mechanic is also one to be careful of and look out for. He's going to say tremble before me, and he means it. He's going to do a swipe directly in front of him in a conal area, and the easiest way to deal with this is either to surge through Zuk, which you could do if you had the double surge ability, but I don't. So instead, all I'm going to do is I'm just going to click and run all the way through Zuk to an area that is safe. You're going to see all these fissures on the ground that pop up, and all you want to do here is just avoid standing on top of the fissures, as you're going to get another burn debuff just like the initial one at the start of the fight with the you will break beneath me, and you're also going to take damage for standing on them. You'll see here that I was hit by a fissure, and that's why I have one singular stack of burn, and fortunately, you clear it the exact same way. So all I'm going to do is, because I got hit there, I'm just going to use the freedom ability, and just like that, the magic damage is going to stop. The next mechanic Zuk is going to do is he's going to say die, and he's going to drop a rock on your head. But fortunately, this setup is absolutely goated, so you can just completely ignore it and tank it with your face. If you really wanted to, you could use something like Resonance or Disruption Shield on it, but it's a 2k hit, and we're going to heal all of that back momentarily just from our melee kit and the abilities that are on our Revo bar, so kinda doesn't matter. With that said, we are now heading in to pizza time. Pizza time is one of the scarier parts of the Zuk fight, because at this point, we're going to have one of each Igneous mob from the earlier challenge waves spawning in one at a time, starting with the meleeer, moving into the ranger, and then there's going to be a mage. And we have to kill all three of them within a time limit, because if we don't, we're going to be instantly killed by Zuk, and it's a hard type instant kill, so it'll kill you through a sign of life and everything. The only way to get through this phase is just to kill the Igneous mobs quickly enough. At the start of the phase, you're going to be stunned in place, and you're also going to be teleported all the way to the southwest corner of the arena, and I'm going to mark on screen where the first mob is going to spawn. It's always going to be a melee Igneous mob. Something you can do here is if you didn't burn your freedom on the fissures, you could actually use freedom here to get rid of the stun, and then you could actually move to where the meleeer is going to spawn ahead of time, but it's not necessary. So we're just going to wait out our stun, then you'll see the meleeer begin to spawn. There are a couple different options for getting to the meleeer. You could run all the way there, which is going to burn the most of your time. You could alternatively use surge to get yourself a little closer. You could use dive to put you exactly where you need to be, or you could use the barge ability, which is why it's on our action bar. In the event that you want to use barge, all you would do is click on the meleeer and then press barge, and as soon as your character can see it, you'll get into position. I'm going to elect to use surge just to get me there a little bit quicker, and as this is the Igneous meleeer, we are going to use backhand to stun and break his shield. And after that, we're just going to let our revolution bar take the wheel. One other thing I'm doing here is, even though I'm being attacked by a meleeer, I'm actually going to keep Prey Magic on. And the reason for that is all the fire in the arena is magic type, and it actually does a ton of damage if you're not praying, but with damage, it's only going to do about 800 or 900 damage per game tick that I'm standing in it. So I found Magic Prey really helpful because it buys you a little bit of time, and it means if you stand on the right spot, you're not instantaneously dead. My Revolution Bar is going to do a bunch of damage to this meleeer, and now you're going to see that the pizza has now disappeared, and that is my sign to move over to the next mob that has started to spawn in. Something else I'm going to mention here is this meleeer is going to die to all of the bleeds on him that my Revolution Bar put on him, so we don't need to worry about him, but if he did survive this, he would just follow us and we could hit him with a love tap and we'd be good to go. But with that said, I'm going to use the barge ability to get onto the ranger a little bit more quickly. You could also dive, you could also surge. Just like that, we're going to let our Revolution Bar handle the rest. My Revolution Bar does an absolutely terrible job here for us, by the way, as it immediately uses Berserk. In order to do full damage to this mob, we need to use a powerful ability, and Berserk doesn't count as one because it's not a targeted ability. So because of this, we're using Berserk, I have no adrenaline, and my first chunk of abilities are not dealing full damage to this Igneous mob, and the mob is continuing to heal. And my first powerful ability ability happened there, where the fire is already starting to disappear. I wanted to show this because in all of the runs I did, this was the worst this revolution bar ever performed for pizza time, and we were still able to complete it no problem at all. Even with the revolution bar being absolutely terrible in terms of terrible luck and terrible timing, we were still easily able to complete pizza phase with time to spare. But I also did want to mention, if you're open to manual abilities, there's nothing wrong with just manually pressing the assault ability, and that'll make this phase even easier. But of course, this is a low input guide, so we're keeping it low input. You'll see at the end of the cycle, we're going to do the exact same thing that we did with the melee mob, which is to say that even though it's not completely dead, that's okay. We're going to head on over to the next mob and deal with it there. One nice thing about this revolution bar though, is we have so many bleeds on the ranger that even though we had to leave early before it was dead, it's going to die to the bleeds, no problem at all. And now we're going to simply click on our third and final Igneous mob, and we're going to let our revolution bar handle the rest. Right as we've got the last Igneous mob dead, Zuk is going to say flames unending, and you're going to see a bar below his head that is slowly charging up. This is the instant kill bar, and if you let this bar get all the way full, that is when you're going to be instantly killed. You'll see here though that the bar actually takes a good bit of time to charge up, and it's relatively lenient. So this would be the moment where if we hadn't killed any of the earlier mobs, there's no more fire on the arena, and this would be our opportunity to go and kill them if we needed to. But in all of the test runs I did with this guide, this was by far the worst pizza phase I had, and we still had plenty of time to spare, so I don't think it's ever going to come up for you. But if it did, this would be your opportunity to kill those last mobs, and then before this bar fills up, you're going to want to press your special action button. I waited on purpose because I wanted to show how long you had, but of course, you want to just press it as soon as you possibly can. Press the button, and just like that, Zuk is going to repeat the exact same fight that we just did before. It's going to be the same mechanics in the exact same order, and we're going to be letting our revolution bar take the wheel. In a second, we're going to get a break beneath me. I'm going to use freedom to clear it. We're going to continue letting revolution move. And then our next mechanic, just like in the first cycle, we're going to surge and then just run back to where we were initially standing to clear it completely. It's about to happen. There's our burn. We're going to surge. I'm going to run back. There's nothing on my debuff bar, so we're good to go, and I'm going to continue attacking. I also took the opportunity here to heal my Hellhound, which is never a terrible thing to do. Always good to look out for that. But we've got the third mechanic, which is the tremble before me. Same thing as last time. If you have surge or double surge, feel free to go ahead and do that. But if you don't, you can just run in a straight line forward, and you'll be good to go. Something else I get to see here that is really cool about this revolution bar, look at my HP right now. I'm literally overhealing on max HP between every single hit of Zuk's. And that's the power of this setup. It's just so ridiculously strong from a healing standpoint that it really does make the actual Zuk part of the fight a complete and utter joke. But with that said, we're about to head in to our second and final pizza time. Something you're going to notice as we head into our second and final pizza phase is this time around, my overload has worn off, and I actually let my overload wear off because I wanted to show how consistent this reroll bar is, and that even without an overload, which is giving me significant damage and accuracy, this revolution bar is still more than good enough for the pizza phase. So with that said, let's get it done. I'm going to head over to the first Igneous mob, and we're going to hit him with a backhand so that we can deal full damage, and then revolution is going to do the rest. We're going to follow the exact same principles as last time though, which means that if there is an Igneous mob that we don't get down in time at the revolution bar, we're going to leave anyway and focus on the next mob. You always want to follow in line with the pizza, and you never want to be standing out in the fire. With the second Igneous mob, it's not going terribly well, but we're still going to leave right away and get onto the magic mob as soon as we can. And we're also praying to deflect magic here for this exact scenario, where there is some fire damage coming in here, and we want to avoid getting killed. As our revolution bar takes care of the mage, you're going to notice that I'm looking at the ranger, and the ranger's actually going to walk all the way up to me, which is going to put him in a perfect situation so that if we need to do any additional damage to him at the end of pizza phase before we get insta-killed, we've got plenty of time to do so. Poison's got my back though. We've still got a lot of time before we have to hit the special action button, and without an overload, this reroll bar is still good enough for pizza phase. With that said though, overloading is probably not a terrible idea, so we're gonna overload up, and we're gonna continue with the same Zuk mechanics as before. There's a You Will Break beneath me, we've used freedom on it. Then the next mechanic we're gonna get is the Sear, where we're gonna surge and then run back. And you'll see it in just a second. There's our Searing Pain. Surge, run back, nothing on our debuff bar, and we're good to go. But one other interesting thing happens at Zuk as soon as you reach 100,000 life points. As soon as you get Zuk below 100,000 life points, his special attack order is actually going to reset. So even though we just had special attacks 1 and 2, instead of moving on over to 3 and 4 and then pizza time, it's instead going to go back to 1, which means we're going to get another You Will Break beneath me as we phased it to 100k. This can throw people off when they're going for their first Zuk cape because they think it goes in like a cyclical order, and it makes sense, and it's just something to look out for and be aware of. But because we phased it here, what's going to happen next is we're going to get another Yule break beneath me. But this time around, because we just had one, I actually don't have freedom available. And because of that, we are going to take a little bit of damage. But as you can see, we're literally being hit 252 every time. It's not game breaking, it's not the end of the world, and all you want to do here is just freedom as soon as you can. After that, we've got the Searing Pain, so we're going to move until it's off of our debuff bar. Alternatively, this late in the fight, you could actually just drink some super restores, but you know, we're going to do it properly. Next up, we're going to get another Earth Yields to me, and we're going to deal with it the exact same way as before, where I'm just going to run through Zuk, and we're going to try to avoid standing in any of the holes in the ground. A fissure spawned super late on me here, and I actually did take some hits, and because of that, we are going to be taking a bit of damage, but because of the setup we're using, being hit 589 every tick, not absolutely terrible, and the strat for this is very simple. Just use freedom as soon as it's off cooldown and it's available, which is exactly what we're going to do. We're also going to get the die attack, where if you wanted to, you could eat here, but we're good. We've hit the freedom, and just like that, and we've just cruised to a successful 25 minute and 48 second no food Zuk cape on an account with level 90 attack, 1 necromancy, 1 archaeology, an invention level somewhere in the 50s, and not a whole lot of bells and whistles, and barely any quest points. One other thing I wanted to mention is you can actually do all 4 of your Igneous stones for all 4 of your Zuk capes with this method. So there's no combat style locking to the way that you do it. So my recommendation, if this method works for you, is just to run it 4 different times, get all 4 of your Zuk capes like this with melee, and you should be good to go for all styles. So with that said, that is the new easiest Zuk cape you are ever going to find. It is quite literally easier and lower requirements than the necromancy one. And all I'm going to say to end this off is melee is so absolutely back. With that said, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you learned a thing or two. Best of luck at Zuk. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again very soon for the next video. And outside of that, don't forget to hit subscribe if you end up getting your Zuk cape with this method.